Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today on navigating the remote and flexible job market. My name is Bree Reynolds, and I am on the FlexJobs career coaching team. And I'm also joined by my colleague today, Tony Frana. And we are going to be splitting up the presentation and sharing lots of really helpful information for you to navigate the remote and flexible job market. So let's get started. The topics we're going to be covering include trends in the remote and flexible job market, and then the top career fields and companies in the remote and flexible job market, how to steer clear of work from home scams, and how to develop your resumes and applications for these types of jobs. So let's dive right into some trends that we have been seeing in the past year or so. First, to get us all on the same page, I want to talk about what a flexible job actually is. So when we refer to a flexible job in the rest of the presentation, we will all be on the same page. So first of all, there can be formal and informal flexible work arrangements. Scheduling is one area of flexibility. So you could have a flexible schedule or an alternative schedule. Location is also something to consider when it comes to flexibility, and usually that relates to being able to work from home, also called telecommuting or remote work. And then the status of the job, whether you are a freelancer, otherwise known as a contractor, or a 1099 employee, or an employee, so like a W-2 employee, that can impact the flexibility of the job. And then the hours that you're working, whether you're part-time or full-time. And so any of these things, if you're given this in a job, could be considered flexible. When it comes to something like a flexible schedule or being able to work from home, those I think are the most obvious types of flexibility for people. But with freelancing, there's a lot of flexibility as well, because you are basically choosing as the contractor who you're working with, the type of work that you're doing, when and how and where you're getting that work done. An employee job, on the other hand, can be a flexible job if it includes some other type of flexibility, like being able to work from home or having a flexible schedule. And then for hours that you're working, part-time jobs are sort of inherently flexible because they offer more time throughout your day that isn't spent at work. But a full-time job, just like an employee job, could be flexible as long as there is another type of flexibility being offered, like if you're a full-time employee, but you're allowed to work from home or have flexible hours. But the bottom line is that anything outside a traditional 9-to-5 in-office role could be considered flexible in some way. And so when we talk about a flexible job in the rest of the presentation, we're talking about all the jobs that fit into these various types of flexibility. And if we mean a certain type of flexibility, like remote work specifically, we will say that. So hopefully that is pretty clear going forward. So the first thing I want you to think about is, what is your ideal flex? There are those varieties of flexible jobs that we talked about, and we've got them all up here on the screen. If you could build your ideal flexible work arrangement, what would that look like? For some people, that might be you being a full-time employee, but you get to have a flexible schedule. For others, it might be a part-time freelancer on the side of your more traditional job. For some people, remote work is king. And I will say for most people, actually, remote work is king. It's the thing that everyone wants to do. So I think for a lot of people listening to this today, remote work is probably one of the first things that you'll talk about or think about. But when you're thinking about your ideal flex, it's really important to have that ideal so you sort of know what you're striving towards in your job search, but also to think of which alternatives to that ideal flexible arrangement would also suffice. So if you couldn't get that ideal, then what types of flexibility would be most important to you? Or how would you rank the flexibility that you're seeking if you had to make a list in order of like your top most required flexibility versus the least required flexibility? So that you have an idea of what you might be willing to be flexible on, pun intended, or negotiate on as you're going through your job search. So just keep that in mind as we keep on going here. So let's talk about some of the trends that we've been seeing over the last year or so, especially as the pandemic has changed so much in terms of how we look at things like remote work or flexible schedules or things like that. So remote job listings in particular are definitely increasing. These numbers are a little bit old. We're hoping to get some new numbers pretty soon, but 20% more remote jobs listed on FlexJobs in 2020 versus 2019, and 76% more fully remote jobs listed. So the fully remote, meaning 100% from home, and these are not pandemic era jobs that are only being done remotely during the pandemic. These are the types of jobs that you could do remotely in the long term. So once the pandemic is over and people are fully back to the office, the jobs that we're tracking here would let you continue to work remotely. So there has been a big increase in the last year. Let's take a look at before and after the pandemic. So before, about 5% of all US employees worked from home full time. And then that spiked up to somewhere in the 60 to 70% range at the height of the pandemic in early or late 2020 and early 2021. And that has since dropped. So as of September of 2021, about 45% of US employees are working from home. And it is expected to drop a little bit more. I mean, the pandemic level remote work isn't something that anyone ever thought would continue at that level after the pandemic is done. So as things continue to go back on site and more offices open up, of course, remote work is going to dip a little bit. But the future prediction now is that 28% of US employees will work from home over the next 5 years. So if you look at, let's say 2022 versus 2027, by 2027, still 28% of US employees will be working from home. And if you think about it, that is a huge increase from just the 5% that used to work from home before the pandemic. So it's going to dramatically shift how we work. And that's full-time remote work, people who are working from home all the time. There will still be a large contingent of hybrid remote workers who are sometimes in the office and sometimes working from home. So the short story, if we're looking at all these trends, is that for remote work, it is a very good time to be searching for remote jobs. There have never been more opportunities than right now. Let's talk about some of the top career fields for remote and flexible jobs. So these are for all types of flexibility. Actually, I shouldn't say that. There's two lists here. So the top remote fields are on the left. These are the fields that offer the most remote opportunity. And the reason we wanted to spotlight that is because so many people tend to want remote work. So you see things like computer and IT, sales, project management, medical and health, and the list goes on. And then we also looked at the fastest growing fields for remote and flexible work. And those include some of the ones that are on that top list, but also some that don't quite cross over, some newer ones that are really fast growing. One that I like to point out in particular is project management. That's now the top, that's the number 3 field for remote work. And even 3 or 4 years ago, that was not in the top 10, and it's already shot up to number 3. So project management is a large and growing career field. And as you can see, it's number 10 for the fastest growing career field. So it's interesting to see trends like that and see where things are going. As you're looking at a slide like this that's showing you a sample of career fields, if you are not seeing the type of job or the type of career that you are looking for on this list, don't be dismayed. That does not mean that there are no opportunities out there for you. This is 10 out of 55 career fields that we look at FlexJobs, and all 55 career fields post both remote and flexible types of jobs. So it's really important to do some additional research. If you're not finding what you want to do on this slide, and in the next couple of slides that I'll show, make sure you're doing your research to find out what is out there for your particular career field. All right, so these are the companies that have the most remote jobs. These are the top 30. And this is out of a list of 100 companies that FlexJobs compiles every year. It's called our top 100 companies for remote jobs. It's the companies that have posted the most remote jobs in the past year. And so you can see on here, there are probably some names that you recognize: Williams-Sonoma, United Health, lots of education types of organizations, EF Education, K-12, and healthcare organizations as well, as they're also well represented here. But then there might be some that you haven't quite heard of, and they may be larger companies, but just not necessarily something that you were familiar with. So when you're looking at a list like this, I really want to encourage you to step outside of what you already know, the companies you already know, the job titles you already know, and start looking for new information, new ideas, new companies to apply to, new job titles to look into, because that is really going to expand your search a lot. But just to show you, remote work and flexible work, they happen in large, traditional, well-established companies, all the way down to small startup companies with just a few employees. So it is something that you can find at pretty much any level. Okay, so let's talk about finding companies and jobs, expanding the what you know and what you're searching for. First of all, location is really important. When you are searching for remote jobs, it's important to know that only 5% of remote jobs are work from anywhere jobs, which means you could do them anywhere you are. The vast majority of remote jobs do have some location or geographic requirement. The reason for that, it depends on the company, but each company has kind of its own reasoning behind it. The biggest ones are employment laws and regulations and tax laws and regulations. Each state within the US has its own set of laws and regs related to taxes and employment, and the whole country has its own set of laws and regulations as well at the federal level. And then each country outside of the US has its own laws and regulations for these sorts of things. So a company that's going to hire someone to work remotely in a different location than where the company is based has to jump through a lot of extra hoops to make that happen. So some companies limit their geographic hiring because of that. They'll say, well, we're only going to hire in these 5 states because we can manage the tax laws and the employment regulations in 5 states, but it's a heavier lift to go beyond that. Administratively, I mean. There's also reasons around training, to have you close to either in-person training that the company wants to do or to some sort of training school or certificate type of program that they want you to go to. Professional licensing, of course, has different regulations in every state. And for certain careers, you need to be licensed in every state in order to practice in that state. Travel arrangements, sometimes they want you to be based around a major travel hub so that they can more easily make your travel arrangements. And then meetings. Some companies want to go in person for meetings or to meet with clients, or because some of your job functions require you to be in a certain location. Like if you're a field researcher, a scientific researcher who does field work, they need you to be based in an area where you can get to the area that you are actually doing the field work and collecting samples and things like that in. So location matters. You want to put in your location whenever you're searching for a remote job. There are a few ways you can find flexible companies. First, there's the FlexJobs Company Guide. This is a free and publicly available database where you can search for companies that have a history of posting remote and flexible jobs. You can search by location, by the company's name, and by the career field. So it is a really helpful resource to just check on companies that you're finding in your own research and see if they've ever posted flexible types of jobs before. You can also check out our list every year. These come out in January of the 100 top companies with remote jobs, and then go directly to companies' career pages. Look for clues on pages like work-life balance or flexible work sections of their career site, but also look at their public relations and media pages, because this is where companies are announcing their post-pandemic plans. Are they bringing people back into the office? Are they letting people work from home? You'll find those details often on those PR and media pages on their websites. And then think of former customers, vendors, business partners, and folks like that. And ask any alumni at any universities or colleges that you've graduated from. Usually there's easy ways to connect with those folks about the policies at their own companies to find out what companies are doing, because things are changing quickly. I feel like every month we hear of new companies announcing their post-pandemic plans or pulling back on some of those depending on how the pandemic is going. And then finding flexible job listings. Of course, there's FlexJobs. We list pre-screened flexible jobs, so everything is screened and verified to be a legitimate professional level experience. And there's no scams, there's no commission only jobs. We weed out all that sort of stuff. But in general, wherever you're searching, we typically recommend going to smaller, more specialty job search websites. So a job search website that specializes in something in particular that you're looking for. That could be the type of flexibility that you want, but it could also be the career fields that you're going into. So there's a few different lists here. If you Google any of these, you'll be able to find them really quickly. There is Skill Crushes, there we go, list of the 25 best sites for finding remote work. They update that every year, and it's usually very current, and it's a great list that continues to grow. Proven has a list of the 100 plus job boards for job seekers and recruiters. That one's organized by industry, so that's the specialty that they're looking into there. And then Ryan Robinson has a list of 72 best freelance job websites to get remote freelance work fast. And that's organized by job type as well. You can also go to industry and professional associations, which there's a couple benefits to those. One is you get good networking opportunities through those, and the other is that they often have jobs listed. So you get 2 things. And then asking your friends, your family, your neighbors, your professional network. Job searching can feel a little bit isolating. And so it's really important to talk to the people around you about what you're looking for and kind of enlist their help in getting you in the right direction, in being a lookout for you. So talk to people about your job search and ask them for what resources they recommend. The last thing I'll say about searching for jobs is the networking piece of it. So we're just talking about talking to people that you know, but when you're talking about or talking to them or talking with them, when you're doing that networking thing, ask not just what they do, but how they do it. So great time to ask about the policies at their companies for remote work or flexible work, where they're searching for jobs, what their day-to-day schedule is like. Pros and cons for working at their company, other companies that they've worked for in the past, really kind of shift that conversation and get more details about how they have been working, not just what they do right now. Okay, the last thing I'll touch on is searching for remote jobs, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tony. So keyword searching for remote jobs, there are lots of keywords out there. These are a pretty exhaustive list of the ones that we've seen, but mostly we recommend people stick with things like telecommute, virtual, and remote if you're looking for remote keywords. There are all these other ones that you should just kind of know in the back of your head so that if you see these on a listing, you'll know what that means. So if you see a listing that says it's home shored, that typically means it's remote work. Or location agnostic, which is my personal favorite. That one also means remote work. And then there are also location keywords to pay attention to. So they might say things like digital nomad, location independent, work from anywhere, or based in North America, which means you could be based anywhere in North America. So look for those as well as clues. Companies, I will say, are getting better at calling out their remote and flexible work arrangements in their job descriptions, but some companies still do hide that information pretty well. So knowing these keywords to be looking for in the job description can help you figure out if something is remote or flexible. On FlexJobs and with other sites, you can search FlexJobs even if you're not a member. So that's important to know. And then on other sites, look for remote search filters. These are not always available. And be careful with remote search filters because I've noticed that a lot of sites have adopted them in the last year or so, but they don't do a good job at allowing you to put your location in at the same time. So you may find lots of remote jobs on, say, like a site like LinkedIn. You can filter for remote jobs, but you can't necessarily filter by your location. So the remote jobs that you're finding may not be available for you where you are. So it is really important to still pay attention to that location piece, especially when you're searching on other sites. On FlexJobs, you can filter by remote and location at the same time. So only jobs that are actually an option for you where you are the ones that you'll see. You should also consider searching by your hard skills and your industry specific skills. So not just job titles, but think about the skills that you have to offer, the skills that you want to use in your next job, and also the soft or transferable skills that you have. So things like communication skills, self-management, the ability to focus, problem solving, those kind of intangible skills that don't relate to a specific task, but they're the skills that we use to do our jobs and do them well. So what are your best soft skills and how can you search by those when you're searching by keyword? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Tony to round out the presentation here and starting with avoiding job scams.
Thank you, Bree, and thanks for that really great information. And along with looking for a remote or flexible job, we do want to share with you some ways that you can avoid job scams. Unfortunately, they are a very real part of a flexible job search, especially for jobs that you can do from home. And we've seen sort of an increase in scams since the pandemic started. For whatever reason, scammers like to take advantage of people who are going through a tough time. So here are some of the main warning signs of scams when it comes to your job search. No company name or a generic email to you from somebody looking to hire you. Now, most companies will have their own, if you work at FlexJobs, your email address is your name at flexjobs.com or some iteration of that. If you get an email from mikesmith@gmail.com, that is something that should raise a red flag for you because it's very generic and that could be coming from anybody. Also, a vague or lack of any job description, but a promise for work and money is something that should also raise a red flag. If companies are asking you for money up front or at all and asking for personal information very early on in the job application process, that is something you want to be wary of as well. Eventually, when you get hired, obviously you'll have to fill out employee paperwork, and personal information is required at that time, but it should not be asked for very early on in the process. With instant messaging and IM interviews, it's interesting because as we've gone through the pandemic on the coaching team at FlexJobs, we've heard from companies and hiring folks that they will sometimes do a pre-screening interview via text or instant messaging. So this in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean it's a scam, but at some point during the hiring process, you should talk to somebody verbally. It should not all be done via instant messenger, and there should be some sort of verbal interview at some point. Anything that comes toward you as a very urgent, you must answer now to a job offer is something that should also, kind of raise some suspicion in your mind as you continue through your job search. There are also ways that companies can get really sneaky. I fell for a scam like this myself, where it looks like Apple was calling me to tell me my computer was hacked, and they logged into my computer. They showed me their website. It looked exactly like the Apple support page, and I believed what they did. Or it was believable. They were believable in that sense, but really what was going on is there was a fake URL that was very similar to the real Apple URL, and we put an example on the slide. www.gecareers.com is actually fake. The real URL has jobs.gecareers.com, but it's a very easy thing to miss. And I think the bottom line is that people who have been scammed, including myself, almost always say there was a point in the process where they thought something was off, something was different, like the employer was acting strangely and something didn't seem quite right. But we keep going because we want the job or we want to get whatever it is fixed. So trust your instinct to keep yourself safe. Just trust your gut. And one sign of a scam doesn't necessarily mean the job is a scam, but it will require you to do more due diligence before you continue to proceed through the process. And on the next slide, I'm going to share with you a couple easy ways to do more research when you feel like there's something suspicious you want to learn more about. So the first method is to do a keyword search for the company's name and or the job title, and then attach the keyword scam, S-C-A-M. When you do this in your browser and you hit enter, it might uncover things like local news reports, Better Business Bureau complaints, any FBI warnings, and any other evidence of scamming that exists. The second method is for a well-known company name. Go ahead and open your browser as well. You can search for the company's name with the keyword careers in an effort to find the real career page or the real career website. Compare that address, that web address that you found with the one that you are concerned about. And if they are not the same, you likely found a scam site. And during the course of the pandemic, I actually was working with a client. We were looking at a job, and when we went to the career page, there was a pop-up box that the company had included that said something along the lines of, there is a job scam out there of people impersonating our company in our application process. Rest assured that this is our true company page, and it went into a little bit of an explanation, which again is also very comforting for a job seeker. All of the jobs that you'll find on FlexJobs, I just want to mention this really quickly, will be screened and vetted before they are added to the site, so you can be confident in knowing that any job you find on the FlexJobs site is not a scam and it's a legitimate opportunity. As we move now into what do you do to be a competitive applicant for remote and flexible work. So once you've found some companies and jobs of interest from, the list and the information that Bree shared earlier, you want to position yourself in the best light for your flexible and remote job applications. So the first thing that you'll want to do is think about the skills that you already have that would make you a great flexible or remote worker. So when we survey employers at FlexJobs, they say that these skills are really important for flexible professionals to demonstrate. So you're going to kind of create a list of these skills around yourself and the skills that you possess. It's probably not a surprise that written and verbal communication skills are on this list and on the top of the list, actually. To work remotely and in a flexible environment, you really have to have great written and verbal communication skills, particularly because what is missing sometimes in remote work are the nonverbal communication cues that we rely on when we work with people in person. So demonstrating that you have strong written and verbal communication skills will be important. Of course, time and task management, the ability to focus and to set boundaries and parameters around your workday. You won't have, a set 9 to 5 that an office is open necessarily. Now, those might be your hours, but if you're working from home, you're still going to have the ability to focus and manage your tasks throughout your workday. It's important to be very proactive when you work remotely and ask questions when you're not certain of how things work or operate or what the communication requirements are going to be. If people in remote and flexible environments, because we don't see each other in person all the time, won't know if you're struggling, if you're overly busy or overly tasked, unless you are really proactive in your conversations and asking questions. Being comfortable with technology and the troubleshooting of said technology when something isn't working is also important. Technology is great until it's not. And so when you work remotely, you have to be really comfortable with your ability to work through those new technology and any issues that might arise at the last minute when you really need to rely on those systems. Having a growth mindset to embrace change and always learning new things, remote and flexible employers really look for that as well. We're going to talk on the next slide about some specific digital communication tools that are used by remote employers. And so getting yourself familiar with some of these can make you a stronger candidate as well. When it comes to these digital communication tools, the great news is that these are skills that you can easily build. What we've got on the slide here are some of the most common programs and tools used by flexible and remote teams. The great news is that each of these either offers a free version or a free trial. What we recommend are a couple of different strategies here. Number one, if you've identified the types of jobs that you're looking for and you've got some job postings that you've been perusing and have piqued your interest, take note of the specific technology tools that might be mentioned in the job posting. So let's say you go through 5 job postings and you see Google Drive, Slack, and Zoom mentioned in 4 out of 5 job postings, and you never notice Skype, Microsoft Teams, or Yammer mentioned. So what I would do and what our team recommends is you prioritize learning these skills based on which ones are going to be most frequently used or seemingly the most frequently used in the types of jobs that you are seeking. So start there. If you're not entirely sure and you're in the process of your job search where you're building some skills, what you want to do then is maybe pick one from each of these categories. You can take advantage of the free trial or a free version and then enlist the help of family or friends so you'll have somebody to communicate with and practice. Don't forget about YouTube. There's always usually some really good how-to videos that you can explore on YouTube as well. When you go to apply to a remote job, you want to make sure that your experience and skills really highlight the remote work experience that you have. And this should be updated every time you apply for a remote job. So the question you want to ask yourself is whether or not you have any previous flexible work experience. And during the pandemic, maybe many of us were kind of thrust into a remote environment, which gave us some more remote experience, but it doesn't necessarily have to have been in a formal environment. A previous remote or flexible work experience includes things like working from home occasionally or all of the time. Maybe you've had a flexible schedule through working part-time or freelancing. This can also be experiences like working across time zones or using some of the previously mentioned digital collaboration tools with your office team. So since keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a formalized situation. As I mentioned, flexible, casual work does count. So ask yourself, for any potential experience that you have, would you be able to talk about how you were productive and effective in that flexible work arrangement? If the answer is yes, then it counts. So that's what you want to take note of. But if you truly don't have any flexible experience, it's okay. Let's talk about how we can get the great skills you have onto your resume document to highlight those skills to make you a more competitive applicant. So the first thing that you'll want to do is look at the job titles on your resume. And if you do have remote or flexible work experience, you can list that a couple of different ways. In the first posting or the first example of the faculty for student mentoring, next to Western Governors University, it says fully remote work. In the second example, this is more maybe of a consulting or freelance role. Underneath the job title, you can list fully remote work. And finally, the third example shows a percentage of remote work that was done at this particular job. You could also say something like hybrid work is another word that we're seeing in some job postings as well. So you can add that you worked remotely or partially remotely right with the job titles that are in the experience section of your resume. Your resume should also have a summary at the top, and the summary is a great place for you to see to add specific flex-friendly skills and experiences. And you can see those, we've underlined them in red, written and verbal communication skills in situations requiring, and then management, project managers, and local or remote teams. So right there, you're highlighting one of those top skills that flexible and remote employers are looking for, as well as the experience that you have with local and teams that are offsite. In the second example, team effectiveness and productivity through communication is underlined, again, highlighting that communication skill, and 6 years experience working remotely and in flexible office environments. And then finally, skilled at team collaboration while working independently in remote environments. So you can see there are a few different ways that you can pull in some of these skills that remote and flexible employers are looking for, and you can do this in your resume summary at the top of your document. You'll remember that we talked about digital communication tools that you want to get familiar with. And how do you show that on your resume? Well, one really great way to do that is through a technology skills section that you can add to your resume to show employers that you are comfortable with these tools, and specifically which ones you are familiar with. In the first example, the first bullet talks about Microsoft Office. The second bullet, remote communication tools, email, phone, video conferencing, and then list out the specific tools that this applicant has: Skype, GoToMeeting, and Zoom. That's really important to include as well. I like the last bullet on this, and we will use this a lot when we're working on resumes with our clients. Something along the lines of showing that you are embracing new technologies and a willingness to learn. You'll remember that that's one of those key skills that employers are looking for, but adapt quickly to new and changing technology is always a good idea to share as well. Effective when communicating remotely over the phone, email, and video chat in the second example. And then one other way you could say this in the third example is tools used for effective remote work. So as you learn more of these remote collaboration programs, you can add them to this new section or this section if you currently have it on your resume. So to recap, here are the main steps that you can take to help you have success in landing a flexible job. Number one, research, research, research. Look at your career field, find out what is out there. Then you can identify your list of your best remote friendly skills and experiences so you know how to position yourself on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, and any other social channels that you frequently use. So then you'll update your application materials and online profiles. Don't forget to leverage your network and really lean into your personal and professional connections to help assist you with this effort. And then finally, start applying for those remote and flexible jobs. And with that, we'd like to say thanks for joining us today, and good luck to everyone.
Can everybody hear me? Go ahead and let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Okay, great. It looks like you can all hear me. Wonderful. My name is Denise, one of the career coaches here at FlexJobs, and I'll be handling the Q&A portion of this webinar. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go over to the Q&As. Again, please make sure to include your questions in the Q&A section and not in the chat section, because I will be answering questions from the Q&A section. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these questions. One of the questions that had 6 votes was, what are the macro level trade-offs between 1099s and W-2 work? Well, basically, W-2 work, of course, you get the employee benefits. Okay, like your health care and your sick and vacation pay, and you're reimbursed for your expenses oftentimes. So those are some of the reasons why you would want to be a W-2 worker. There is more of a time commitment with a W-2. As a W-2 employee, you're going to be working with them for an indefinite period of time. Now, the employers have more control over you as a W-2 employee as well. It is a higher cost for the employer, and there are increased legal complexities for a W-2 worker. And actually for a 1099 contractor, I should say, because there are a lot of laws that are out there that very clearly distinguish between what a W-2 employee is and a 1099 employee. And sometimes there can be some blurring of the lines, and employers can get into a lot of trouble if they're not careful. Because oftentimes that can actually be where they are taking advantage of the person who is actually an employee rather than a 1099 contractor. Okay, there is more time commitment for employees, of course, as we mentioned before. Now, with a 1099, you have more freedom, but you also have more risk. Oftentimes you can, you can just do your work whenever you need to get it, as long as you get it done by the deadline. But there's more risk in that you don't have consistent work. So there might be periods of time where you're not making any money at all because you don't have any work. So yeah, there's a few trade-offs there. It is less expensive for employers because they don't have to pay for benefits. But again, there's no stability. There's usually weaker relationships, and so on with 1099. So hopefully that will help you with some of those the high-level trade-offs between 1099 and W-2. W-2 is more permanent and stable, and requires more of a commitment. 1099s are, it's mainly project based and it's temporary. And then, after you're finished with that project, you don't have any work unless you have something already lined up. And then, of course, you have to pay taxes on 1099s, whereas the employer pays the taxes on primarily for W-2 work. Okay. With remote work, how is the number of hours of work verified? Is this a question to ask during the interview session? Okay, well, typically it's just really going to be dependent upon the employer. For instance, our employer, with what we do is we clock in and we clock out. Okay, and so that's how the hours are verified. The employer trusts us enough um, to know that we are being honest with our hours. And I'm sure that the employer also has ways to tell if that's being taken advantage of. But so that's basically how we do it here. There's a lot of different ways that employers do it. If you're salary based, then typically you're paid a salary. They may want to know what your start and end times are, perhaps. But it's really going to be dependent upon what system they have in place. Some have systems where they know when you've logged into their system and when you're logging out. So it's really going to be dependent again upon the employer. And it's really just a matter of trust in most cases. Uh, why are the expert skills tests your platform offers do not review the answers at the end of the exam? Because typically these exams are not designed to do that. These exams are designed to basically tell you whether or not you should be able to put those skills on your resume because you got a score of, say, 70% or higher, or if you need to work on those skills more. So, we do have a link that we will go ahead and provide to you. Actually, it's in the handouts as well, as to where you can go to build your skills. So the tests are really just designed to tell you whether or not, it's something that you could put on your resume or it's something that you need to work on. Okay, but to build your skills, we also have a link in our handout section. Feel free to take a look at that. We will also be sending out that link along with the link to this video within a week's time. Okay. The next question is resumes. Include a photo or not? No, do not include a photo for US or Canadian resumes. The only time that you're going to include a photograph is if you are creating a CV or curriculum vitae for other countries. That other countries may require a CV, and other countries may want a photo on the CV. The best thing to do is to take a look at, we have a link that I'll send you on CVs for different countries that are European, and we'll go ahead and provide that link to you so you know which countries prefer photos and which countries do not. But for the United States and Canada, typically there are a lot of anti-discrimination laws, and having that photo on your resume may open the employer up to discrimination. So we, in the United States and in Canada, do not require a photo, and it's recommended not to include one. Okay, and I would think that the future predictions for people working from home would continue to be on the uprise. Well, uh, typically it is more than what it was pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, again, it was only 5%, and it will be about 28% by the end of 2027. So that has increased from pre-pandemic levels. But during the uh, really height of the pandemic, that's when it became very necessary to do that. And still, a lot of employers are wanting people to return back to work now. So hopefully that answered your question there or your comment. Okay. These things are jumping around on me, so I'm trying to mark them as answered, but then they jump on me. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Do we have any that have one? Okay. To follow up on the resume photo question, would it be beneficial to add a picture for profiles for job search sites? Well, like on LinkedIn, actually, you are 7 times more likely to be viewed. Your profile's more likely to be viewed if you do have a photo. And if you're concerned about ageism, you can always do a photo from a distance, from the side view, somebody taking a picture of you working on your computer so they don't really see your face as much. And again, from a distance, you could be on top of a hill showing your personality with your arms spread wide apart, but they can't really see your age if that's a concern of yours. But definitely it's not necessary to have on a resume, just on maybe your LinkedIn profile. Okay. So actually it looks like we are out of time. Um so yeah, it looks like we are out of time. So I really thank you so much for participating in this webinar and for coming to this event. Please feel free to check out our other webinars and events so that way you can be really well versed in remote jobs and what you need to do in order to become successful in obtaining one. Um, and for now, that is all that we have. So you have a wonderful day and we wish you all the best.